The color, Ceiling Bright White. The company, Sherwin-Williams. This is Hue Review, so let's review. I'm James, this is the Paint People. If you are new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things painting, decorating, color, and color theory. It is a passion of mine, and this is the show all about reviewing paint colors specifically. Ones that maybe I would use in my home, maybe I wouldn't. It all depends on my verdict, which comes at the end of the video. But before I get you my actual thoughts on this paint color, personally, I want to give you the vibe of it, the essence of this color, what to expect when using it, and also its versatility component. How usable, how flexible is this color in practical use? So I think that's what matters most to a lot of people. It's not the undertones necessarily or the type of flower petal that this color most represents. A lot of people are just wondering, is this a color I should use? Is this one that I'm gonna have to repaint in a year because it's so polarizing? So I love to talk about a color's versatility. Today's sponsor is us. ThePaintPeople.com is your go-to destination for quality paint and paint supplies. One of our standout features is our ability to create any color from all major paint brands. And the best part, we deliver across the US and Canada. Visit our website today and discover a world of colors, quality, and convenience. And as a thank you for supporting us on YouTube, use coupon code JAMES5 for 5% off your order. Now, before we dive in deep into Ceiling Bright White, I'm gonna give you some alternatives in other paint companies' colors, because if you're not used to using Sherwin-Williams paint or you're just not interested in it, these are gonna be comparable colors. They're not spot-on matches, but these are going to be some of your closest options in other companies. So if you use Valspar, if you're a big fan of Behr, these colors are gonna give you a generally close match to Ceiling Bright White. But hey, don't hold me to it, okay? All right, so what's the vibe of Ceiling Bright White? Is it a color that you should only use on your ceiling? Is it really that bright? No to both of those things. My subscribers watching know the term LRV because I talk about it a lot. It's one of the most important things when judging a paint color, especially a white paint color, because it tells you how bright the color actually is in real life. And it does this by giving you a 0 to 100% of light reflection, and that's LRV. Ceiling Bright White has an 83, which means it reflects 83% of the light that hits it, and that sounds like a lot, and it is, I guess, objectively, but in the realm of white paint colors, it's actually not that bright. I've seen white paint colors that are in the low 90s in terms of LRV, so 83, it kind of solidifies it to me as a little more of an off-white, but not in the way that you might expect. Ceiling Bright White's offness doesn't come from cream, yellow, or even blue for that matter. It is more of a grayed out white. The coloration to it isn't very strong whatsoever. If anything, it may have a touch more of a green undertone coming through, but in real life, when you see it in person, it looks pretty clean. It doesn't look like a gray. I find these pretty neutral grayed out whites tend to have a little more of a cool color cast, even a blue lean, just because of the fact that it doesn't have anything else on the warm side of things to sort of pull it in that direction, or at least neutralize it. And typically you will have cooler lighting in your home, unless you load up your home with incandescent bulbs to give you that warminess. Not warminess, warminess. That is a hard word to say. But talking about things like LED bulbs that are set to that bright white, that brilliant blue setting, or even a north-facing exposure, which can bring in some of that cool light as well, Ceiling Bright White will feel a little more blue-leaning, just ever so slightly, especially if you have it next to things that are pretty warm. That being said, it's been featured in a ton of Sherwin-Williams collections. It is a popular color, and I wonder if it's because of its simplicity and its naming. Ceiling Bright White. Okay, great. That is going to be the brightest white for my ceiling. That's perfect. Well, guess what? There are much brighter whites by Sherwin-Williams. So that's the vibe. That's the essence of this color. Ceiling Bright White is actually more of a grayed out, slightly bright white. It's not competing with high reflective white, but it's also not so dark that it's a light gray. It does have that white quality to it, especially when you see it on its own. So what's the versatility of this color? How versatile is Ceiling Bright White? How usable is it? How practical is it? How flexible is it with different design styles, different flooring types, and all that? On the interior side of things, I would give this color a high versatility. Let me tell you why. Normally when I judge an off-white paint color that's kind of on the cusp of being a like a very, very light gray versus a white, I sort of dock it a couple marks on the versatility department. You start to lose the purpose of it because it's not light enough to be a pure crisp white that a lot of people are looking for, and it's also not gray enough where it'll just be a nice wall color to give you a soft gray. It's kind of in between, but I still think the way that it's composed, it does feel pretty crisp and clean, even though it's mellowed out with some of that gray. As a color in your home, on things like ceilings, I think it works really well. I also think it's a great trim indoor color if you're not looking for something too brilliant. In fact, that little bit of gray does make it a bit better in terms of maintenance and upkeep. It's not so bright that you'll see every single little sponge. And I know people like to say, well, just clean your doors and your trim and your walls. I'm like, yeah, I try to, but sometimes things happen. Kids, pets. On the exterior side of things, I would probably give ceiling bright white a mid versatility, low mid maybe. I think whites outside can be a bit tricky. They can just seem very, very bright oftentimes. Ceiling bright white does have that gray to sort of mellow it out a little bit, which I think is nice. So as a trim color, maybe as a door color, you could theoretically use it as a main body color, but I would probably advise against it only because of that cool aspect, that gray, green, slightly blue vibe of ceiling bright white. That could make it feel a little more blue outside because the sunlight gives you that nice bright white cool light that will accentuate any coolness in whatever white paint color you use. So maybe not my first choice. I tend to sort of favor slightly warmer leaning whites outside, but that's just me. Before I give you my verdict on whether this is a good color or not, whether I would use it in my home, I'll give you some color pairings that I like with it. So because we're starting with such a bright white color, I'm going to give you a light color and then a mid-tone. So you have 3 different varying levels of darkness or lightness. So the light color I would pick is Silver Point, with an E on the end. And this is a color that further goes towards that direction of gray, a little bit of green, and a touch of blue, yet still feels quite neutral. And I think this is a great wall color in conjunction with ceiling bright white, either on the trim or the ceiling. And then the mid-tone color to sort of pair with all these is Ellie Gray, and this one has a 40 LRV, pretty dark, much darker than the other ones, but still kind of within that mid-tone level of darkness. So absolutely can still be a wall color, not just an accent form, but if you have enough lighting in the space, you can use it in a room, no problem, in my opinion. I should stop saying that. Just my opinion, okay? This is my opinion, please. There's no right or wrong when it comes to opinions, right? Those are the pairings. What's my verdict? Where would ceiling bright white go on the palette pyramid? How would I use this color? Is it a main color that you could just plaster everywhere? Maybe. Is it a support color? Probably. Is it a finishing color to just have a little pop, little accent of white? No. It is a support color. Ceiling bright white is going to be one of those secondary colors that you can use on the trim, more so than the ceiling. I prefer using brighter whites on the ceiling because it's going to reflect the maximum amount of light back into the room. Ceiling bright white feels fairly neutral, at least neutral enough as a white where it could work, but I would just go a little bit brighter. Like, there's nothing that I can't stand more than getting a pre-mixed can of white ceiling paint that you can't even tint, it's just white, and then you actually put it up there and it looks kind of gray. Like, it looks a little bit off. That's what ceiling bright white is to me, kind of. So I'm a little bit triggered by it being branded as a ceiling paint, and it's actually not too bright. So that's how I'd use it. Have I given away if I would use it? No, I don't think I would use ceiling bright white. I don't really like the false advertising here. It's not a color I would ever really want to use on a ceiling. Yes, it's a bright color, but it's not a bright white. Shame on you, Sherwin-Williams. But hey, maybe you want a color palette utilizing this color, ceiling bright white. If you do, let me know in the description down below. And between muslin and ceiling bright white, one of these colors is getting a palette pyramid. You let me know which one you want to see. We have another video right over here. The color Cloud White. The company Benjamin Moore. This is Hue Review, so let's get on to reviewing. I'm James from the Paint People, and this of course is Hue Review, the premier paint color review show on YouTube, where my goal is to review every single color that's ever been put out by these paint companies. We got a lot of time to get through these. This show is all about vibe, versatility, and my verdict. Is this a color that I would use and recommend to all of you? And if so, how would I use it? Before I dive into this color, these are some other alternatives from different competitors. If you're not a fan of Benjamin Moore paint for whatever reason, these are some loose color matches in other paint companies that you can use that won't be identical to Cloud White, but at least it'll give you a similar sort of feel, similar essence, dare I say a similar vibe. But the only way to get Cloud White for real is to just get it in Benjamin Moore paint. Sorry, color matchers, but that perfect match is pretty much impossible to do. And I know, I was a color matcher for years. Okay, so let's get into the vibe. What is the vibe of Cloud White? Is it gonna keep me floating on cloud nine? God. I wrote in my notes, make a cloud joke, and that's the best I came up with, so you're welcome. Cloud White is an interesting color because it's one that I really remember at the very beginning of my paint career. When I used to work at the paint store and when I used to help with the family painting business, Cloud White was all the rage. Like before Simply White and Chantilly Lace were like the best whites by Benjamin Moore, this was the go-to white. And I think why it's remained one of Benjamin Moore's best-selling colors is it does a nice job at keeping this lovely airiness, this brightness, and this warmth that isn't yellow dominant. It's not just a white can of paint that has been dosed with some yellow colorant. It has a little more to it, a little more beige leaning. Dare I say it has like a touch of like a taupey sort of feel, like a little bit of a neutral softening that tones it down ever so slightly. And I think that's an important thing to distinguish between the other warmer whites that exist, because Cloud White just feels softer, kind of like a nice pillowy cloud. Even though you can't really touch a cloud, it's just vapor and condensation. Cumulonimbus. Let's get into some technical jargon. The LRV is an 85 out of 100. And this means Cloud White reflects 85% of the light that hits it, which makes it a very bright color. Not the brightest color, not even as bright as Oxford White, which is a color we recently reviewed, but it is still in that upper echelon of paint colors. It's interesting because I would kind of call this an off-white. It does have a noticeable amount of colorant in it and warmth that does prevent it from feeling just like a straight up stark white, which we'll get into in a second. But in actual practice, when you are using it as, let's say, a wall color and you're just putting it all over a space and really just color washing an area with Cloud White, it will feel pretty white. It's not going to feel like a beigey sort of color, a yellowy warm cream or an ivory. In a lot of cases, it will just end up feeling like white. It'll become the neutral of the space, which I think is really, really nice. Because there is a fine line. If you go a little too warm, then you're no longer in off-white territory. You're in that light beige category, which this one isn't. So yes, clearly a warmer white paint color, but not so simplistic and yellow leaning. It does have that little bit of that creaminess that just keeps it nice and toned down, which I think is a nice touch. So that's the vibe check done. What about versatility? How versatile is this paint color inside and outside of the home? This is, I think, is a very important factor when it comes to paint colors. The more versatile the color is, the more ways you can use it, and also the less of a chance you'll need to repaint it in the next year or two, because it can fit in a number of different ways and design styles, which is really, really cool. I give it a high rating for versatility in the home. Similar to Oxford White, this is a paint color that I have seen used all over a home, on the walls, on the trim, on the ceiling. In fact, I would almost recommend that in certain cases if you are thinking of using a white paint color on your walls, and Cloud White is one you're really gravitating towards. You probably want to continue that onto your baseboards as well. Just have it sort of all the same colors so they're not really clashing with one another. Just be sure that you're using wall paint on the walls, trim color on the trim, and the real difference between those is the finish. So typically your wall paint will have a flatter finish, whether it's matte or eggshell, and then your trim is going to have maybe a satin, pearl, semi-gloss, high gloss if you're feeling rambunctious. And that's for practicality reasons, because your trim is going to be washed a lot more often, and it's also close to where your toesies are on your baseboards that are going to be kicking it sometimes. I mean, I don't wear my shoes indoors, but that's just me. Not judging you if you do. Exterior-wise, I would also call this a high versatility color. I think the warmth in Cloud White really does help sort of balance itself out when against the sun's bright, cool lighting. So the two meeting can kind of neutralize each other and just give you a nice, soft, but still pretty bright white. I prefer brighter whites like this to be used not necessarily as the main body color, because that can be a little much. Just test it out a little bit on one area before you commit to it. See if you like that amount of brightness. But anything else, like certain trim, maybe the door you want to be white, window frames, things like that, I think it's a great choice. All right, so what's the verdict? How would I use this color? Where would it fit on the Paint People palette pyramid? This is going to be a support color for me because I mainly use Cloud White as a trim color on the baseboards, doors, and frames. I think it can be used on the walls. It is just one of those things where because it's a white, it's a lighter color, it could be trickier to apply depending on the product you use. It might require a few extra coats. And also it's not as forgiving when it comes to smudges and nicks and bumps and scrapes. Because it is so bright, it's going to reveal a lot of those those imperfections, typically speaking. So maybe a main color, sometimes I've seen it happen, but mostly it's going to be a support color for me. So that's how I'd use it. But would I? Currently, no. And hey, kind of hard to say because cloud white is one of my favorite colors, really. It's one that I've used on many projects, and I have nothing against it. I just think there's another bright, warm white that I would maybe use instead of it. But cloud white's still good. Like, I feel bad for saying no, but it is what it is. Let me know if you want a palette pyramid using cloud white in the comment section below, because I can put it together for you in a video. And we got another video right over here. Crazy. The color, Ivory White. The company, Benjamin Moore. This is Hue Review. So let's review. I'm James from the Paint People, and this is a channel all about painting, decorating, color, and color theory. And Hue Review is the quintessential paint color review show on this YouTube network that we have. My goal is to review every single paint color that I can, and we're doing it one review at a time. The way that I like to review is I want to give you the vibe of the color, what to expect from it, the versatility aspect of it, whether it is a usable color that you can kind of put in and input into a bunch of different situations and it work fine. Did that sentence work fine? And then I'll give you my verdict on whether I would use this color in my home and a couple of color pairings as well. Today's sponsor is us. ThePaintPeople.com is your go-to destination for quality paint and paint supplies. We're more than just a paint store. We are your partner in bringing color to life. Visit our website today and discover a world of colors, quality, and convenience. And as a thank you for supporting us on YouTube, use coupon code JAMES5 for 5% off your order. So right before we dive into this review on Ivory White, here are some other alternatives from other paint companies that come pretty close. They're not going to be spot-on matches, but if for whatever reason you weren't using Benjamin Moore paint, these are some alternatives in other paint companies that give you maybe 80 to 90% of the way. So what's the vibe of Ivory White? What kind of color is this? Well, we can tell that it's a white because it's in the name, so the labeling is fairly correct. Although I would say Ivory White to me is a little more of a lighter off-white because it has some decent coloration to it. It's not a clean, stark white. There's definitely some undertonage happening here. The undertones that I really get from it are a creamy, yellow-based warmth. This is nice because I feel like a lot of people are pushing away from cooler colors, typically, especially in the neutral category, and they're opting for these more warmer colors because it just makes their home feel all nice and cozy and warm and rosy. Now, I did mention off-white, and that's because this color isn't quite as bright as you might expect. It has an 83-ish LRV, which is the light reflectance value. The higher the number is, the whiter it'll be because it'll be brighter, it'll reflect more light. 83 is pretty high, but it's not the highest I've seen. I've seen 93 LRV paint colors, in rare cases 94 even. So Ivory White at an 83, still a very light color. If you were to use this on a larger surface, maybe you would just think it's white depending on your lighting, but compared to a really bright, crisp white, you'll definitely notice that creamy yellow warmth pretty prominently. So that's the vibe. What is the versatility aspect here? How usable is Ivory White on interior and exterior surfaces? Well, from the interior side of things, I would put this at a mid versatility, maybe low mid, I would say. Off-whites typically are extremely easy to use because a lot of people will want those lighter, brighter colors to reflect as much light back into their space. And a creamy white is kind of nice because of the fact that it is cozy, it is inviting, it is warm, quite literally and figuratively. The problem I have with Ivory White is that yellow undertone, and when you use it indoors, depending on your decor, depending on the stuff you have, the fixtures, the furniture, that yellow undertone may kind of present itself in a strange way. It may give you a bit of a yellowy greeny vibe if you have a lot of blue lighting coming from north-facing windows or LEDs. There is a chance that Ivory White could be a little problematic in those circumstances. The one thing that I will say that's nice about it is the fact that it does have that little bit of depth. It's more of an interesting white. It's not just a plain, boring, dead white. It has some likability to it because of its warm vibrancy, and this makes it a decent option for walls rather than just a white paint color that you might only use on frames, doors, and ceilings. On the exterior side of things, I would put Ivory White at a high-low versatility, the higher end of the low. And to me, it is because of that yellow undertone that I think really doesn't always work nicely. I'm just not a huge fan of yellowy, creamy colors when used outside because it lacks the depth to really go all the way with that yellow undertone. So you end up having this little bit of ambiguity with that yellow where sometimes it just kind of looks a bit off to me. It could still work for you, but it's just not one of my favorites as an exterior choice. So what's the verdict here? Where would I put Ivory White on the palette pyramid? Our arrangement of colors from top to bottom, is it a main color that you can use as the whole house color, one color fits all type of thing? Is it a support color that's more secondary? Or is it an accent choice? Is it a finishing color along the bottom of the pyramid? Of the three choices, I think I would put Ivory White as a main color. Believe it or not. I think this is a choice that you could use on walls. In fact, I would probably prefer it on walls as long as it suits your decor. I could see this working really well with hardwood flooring. Any of those warmer floors, I think, coordinate really nicely. And it's just going to reflect a lot of light back into the space. So if you're going for that more open, airy feel, Ivory White could be a great main color. To a lesser extent, it could be a good support color, either as a warm trim if you really want to lean into that creamy, warm baseboard kind of look, or you can also use it as a secondary wall color to support maybe a darker main color. But I think that if you were to use this on walls, it might work best in those larger open parts of your home, which would be the use of the main color. Now, before I gave you my verdict on whether I would actually use this color, let me give you some other colors that are in the same family, but just give you different levels of depth. The first one being Chatsworth Cream, which shares a lot of similarities to Ivory White, but it has more depth and more richness. But a 76 LRV, so still a light color, but I wouldn't quite call it a true off-white. This is a color that you would use maybe in place of Ivory White if you wanted a little more richness. Maybe you have way more light coming in and Ivory White just kind of looks washed out. Chatsworth Cream does give you that nice amount of noticeable beigey warmth rather than just a cream. And then for a mid-tone color that's sort of in the same family, I would recommend something like Monroe Bisque, which is a 58 LRV paint color, so you get a lot more color into it. You get a lot more noticeable coloration. Monroe Bisque almost goes into like honey tan territory. So once you add enough of that colorant in, enough of that richness in, it really veers away from that yellowy, creamy color into a more traditional neutral. So back to Ivory White. Would I use this color? Could I see myself putting this in my home in the next year or two? I don't think this is a color that I would use on the walls. Maybe off of the walls, not even in the form of paint, like accessories, absolutely, but I just think the yellow undertone is a little too volatile for my tastes. That's just me though. And that's a review. If you want me to do a palette pyramid utilizing this color, let me know in the comment section below. And we got another video right over here. I'm about to share with you a Sherwin-Williams color palette that I put together utilizing Eider White by Sherwin-Williams. This is a color we recently reviewed on the channel, so if you want to have more information on it specifically, I'll leave it in the description down below. But this video is all about our palette pyramid, our 6-color palette that you can use in your home or even on your home if you really wanted to. All 6 of these colors work really well interchangeably. Some accent colors, a few support colors that you can use on trim and things like that, and then of course a main color that ties it all together. Thepaintpeople.com is your go-to destination for quality paint and paint supplies. We're more than just a paint store, we are your partner in bringing color to life. Our commitment to fast shipping ensures that your order will reach you promptly so you can start your project without unnecessary waiting. Visit our website today and discover a world of colors, quality, and convenience. And as a thank you for supporting us on YouTube, use coupon code JAMES5 for 5% off your order. So why don't we start right there with our main color, which of course is Eider White. A former color of the month, not quite color of the year caliber apparently, Eider White is one of my favorites by Sherwin-Williams. It's a lovely off-white, it feels very soft, and considering it's labeled as a white, it has a decent amount of depth to it with a 73 LRV, or light reflectance value. 0 to 100, the higher that number, the brighter the color is. So not super bright, but also kind of in that lighter echelon of paint colors. The depth that it brings is fascinating because of the fact that it's not a really cool blue leaning off-white, but it's also not a beige leaning one either. It really straddles the line in a nice way. Kind of a stony sort of gray quality in the background, maybe a bit of taupe perhaps, but it does feel relaxing yet still crisp, which I do like. So at the top of the pyramid, Eider White sits proudly on the pinnacle. This is going to be your main color of the whole palette, so the one you can use the most theoretically. You can have it all over your house if you wanted to, but let's say you wanted to incorporate other paint colors. Well, we'll move down the palette pyramid to our second tier, which is of course our support colors, or our secondary options. And for this level, I have two options, one very light and one not so light. The light option is going to be Snowbound, which of course is a much brighter white paint color than Eider white. This is going to be your option if you want something white in your home, whether it's your trim, your doors, your frames, your crown molding, whatever the case may be. If you're using Eider white as the predominant color, Snowbound would be my choice for a white color to pair with it. A real white paint, not an off-white. Our second support color is quite a bit darker, but this could be a good choice if you wanted another color for the walls in your rooms that maybe needed a little more depth. Argos would be my second support color. So this choice is going to be very different from Eider white and especially Snowbound. It's very rich. It has a 51 LRV, so that makes it pretty much a mid-tone paint color through and through. And you also have quite a bit more coolness coming through, like an unadulterated coolness. Really cool. What can still be described as a bit of a stone gray, this one is less on the taupey brown side and more so on that cooler, almost teal lean, like a bit of blue, a bit of green mixed together, but still pretty toned down and shaded. So it isn't that gray collection of colors, but a pretty noticeable amount of blue-green, especially compared to Eider white. They are somewhat complementary, but still within that neutral colorscape. So I think they go together really, really well. All right, moving on to our finishing colors. This is going to be the tier, the bottom row, that are more of your accent choices, bringing in either more depth, more saturation, or maybe some more vibrancy and some fun. The first option I would recommend is Acier. And this is a color that really just feels like a much, much deeper version of Eider white. A bit of a ground base, some subtle warmth, definitely a taupe feeling throughout. So nice combination of that brown and that gray coming together, but it does lean to the warm side of things ever so slightly. Your lighting may make it appear cooler than it actually is, but you only know that if you test it out. So please test your paint colors. But a perfect darker neutral paint color with a 32 LRV if you wanted that same sort of essence of Eider white, but just a lot more richness. Maybe it's a room that gets a ton of light, so you're afraid Eider white might get washed out a bit. This color is not going to get washed out. It is quite rich indeed. This next option is one I haven't really talked about before, but I'm pretty excited to introduce it to you guys. Similar vibe to the last one, kind of. It's called Poised Taupe, but if you see it on the screen, or if you see it on the walls especially, you will notice this is more than just gray and brown mixed together. You have that introduction of red, which can sometimes give you this sort of burgundy feeling, or even a bit of a purple vibe in some cases. And this is a color that feels less like a neutral when you use it. The good news is it's not super vibrant. It has that undertone that really makes it different, but it's not going to feel too out there. So it still fits within that semi-neutral color scheme that a lot of people do enjoy. Just a little bit of a nearly neutral that I like to throw in once in a while. We then have our most vibrant of the finishing colors. It's called Jasper Stone. Now we're coming back to that cool theme that maybe Argos really introduced to us, but this is a color that doesn't have a ton of that grayed out feeling to it. It feels more pure in its turquoise nature, that gentle bluey green color, little bit of a gray feeling over top, but not so much, especially compared to the other colors. This is one that you will notice. It's going to pop the most, and I think it's going to feel like your most fun accent color of the finishing choices. So bathroom color, bedroom color even, cabinetry, furniture. I can really see this working in a lot of circumstances. Great color, really fun, and here is the palette all together. Please let me know what you think of it. Also, if you want your own personalized color palette made from me, we do offer it as a service down below, whether you need a 3-color palette or all the way up to a 12-color palette. If you're doing your whole house, we can do that. More information down below. We have another video right over here. The color, Oxford White. The company, Benjamin Moore. I'm James from The Paint People. This, of course, is Hue Review, the premier color review show on YouTube that aims to review every single paint color by all the major paint companies out there. We're slowly chipping away. And of course, the whole team really appreciates you guys joining us for today's review on Oxford White by Benjamin Moore. This is a paint color that I have used pretty prominently and pretty extensively, but does that mean that I like it? I don't know. I mean, most of the time, I just end up using what the customer wants, right? Who needs my opinion? Except for maybe you guys watching. Hue Review is all about the 3 V's. We got vibe, versatility, and verdict. I'm going to give you my actual honest opinion on whether I would use this color in my home and how I would use it if I would. So right before we get into the review, here are some other alternatives from different paint companies. These are going to be close to Oxford White in the competitors' brands, but they're not going to be spot on. The only way you can get a full-on Oxford White experience is to actually get it in Benjamin Moore paint. So to start things off, what is the vibe of Oxford White? What is this color all about. So the name gives away the fact that this is going to be a white. It's some form of white, whether it is a bright white or a not so bright white. That kind of depends on your perspective, but I find Oxford white to be pretty clean, pretty simplistic, and I would say it is a fairly bright white. The color purists out there would call it an off-white because it's not a bright white, but I do sort of feel it kind of lives in that white territory where you could use it in a project as a white, meaning on ceilings and things like that. It has a very clean and simplistic feel to it overall, and it also has a pretty high LRV. This, of course, is the light reflectance value, which is a very important number to be aware of. Essentially, from 0 to 100, the higher that number is, the lighter and brighter it'll appear, and also the closer to white it will be. So even though 86-ish is still, 14 points away from a perfect score of 100, that's still going to be very, very bright in the grand scheme of paint colors at large. So yeah, Oxford white, it does its job at being a white. But what kind of white is it? Is it blue leaning? Is it yellow leaning? I hear some conflicting things on it, and although some people will say it has a touch of warmth to it, I really find it to be extremely neutral, a slight grayed out feel, and in some cases, if you have cooler lighting in your home, it can get a little bit cool, kind of in a similar way that Decorators white did, which we also reviewed if you haven't seen that. But Oxford white does feel a bit brighter than that, a little more clean. So for anyone that does want a pretty simplistic white experience as a paint color, Oxford white will not disappoint you. But in the same regard, it's not going to give you any coordinating undertones that maybe will suit a warm color scheme a bit better, or even a contemporary one that's maybe a bit cooler leaning. Oxford white just sort of sits in the middle, so kind of a jack of all trades, maybe a master of none. We'll have to see in my verdict. So before we get into interior and exterior versatility, please do me a favor and press that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, because we release a few reviews like this every single week, as well as exclusive color palettes that I put together for free for y'all. Y'all. Can you tell I'm not from Texas? The way I said y'all just didn't feel natural to me, I guess. So vibe is done. Check. What about versatility? This is going to be the most underrated thing I think about paint colors. It's one of my most important factors when I'm recommending paint colors, because a color that is versatile and flexible and interchangeable is everything, because things change in design. Obviously, they change from person to person, but also even the same person will have a very different perspective on what they like within a year or 2 or 3. So a versatile paint color gives you a lot more options, and it also might prevent you repainting in the near future. So to start things off, on the interior side, I would give Oxford white a high versatility, an extremely high versatility, actually. The reason for it is because of the fact that it is so neutral feeling, and it just doesn't really push the envelope in any way. It just sits in a nice little pocket that feels just reliable. And it's so reliable that I have used this paint color to paint an entire home, top to bottom, including walls, baseboards, crown molding, frames, even the ceiling. Everything was Oxford white. And I think it left a really nice art gallery sort of aesthetic that was awesome, and not too overpowering because, like I mentioned earlier, not the very brightest white that exists. So you do have a little bit of a mellowed out approach to white paint colors with this one, which I think is great. Now, what about exterior versatility? If you're thinking of using this color outside, I would give this color another high versatility. I love this color outside, and yes, it might be a bit bright if you're painting it on a large surface, like the main body of a home, but there might be some cases where, yeah, you want to be the brightest house on the block, you want that pure white, you're not interested in an off-white or a light neutral. Oxford white's going to give you a really nice, clean look that I think can't really be beat in a lot of cases. Personally, I'm still a little partial to the off-whites outside just because it does feel a bit softer and more subdued, but again, I can't really blame people for wanting the bright white house. Oxford white ends up being one of my higher recommendations for that use case. Verdict. Okay, so Oxford white, you kind of get an idea of what it is. Very clean white paint color. How would I use it on a project? If we were talking about the palette pyramid with a main color on top, support colors underneath, and then finishing colors down below that are more accents, Oxford white is almost always going to be a support color. It is not only going to be an awesome trim color, it's also going to be a good ceiling color. It's going to be good on doors. It could also technically be a wall color if you want a really bright white, but not the brightest white. That might be A, annoying to apply, and B, might be a little too overbearing, especially if you have a lot of light coming in. In some cases, you could maybe call it a main color if you really want just that minimalist art gallery, Gandhi sort of feel that's white on white everywhere, and then everything else in the house can really stand out. But for everyone else, Oxford white, absolutely a support color. So that's how I'd use it. But would I? Yes, I would use Oxford white. I think it's a great color. Not necessarily my number one recommendation as a trim color. I mean, some of my subscribers and my Patreon members probably know which color I'm talking about. But for everything else, this could be an awesome choice for just a really straightforward white that just goes the distance. It's pretty usable in a lot of circumstances, especially on the interior side of things, but also taking it outside. I think it's also a nice neutral color for that purpose as well. So that's the review. Do you want a color palette with Oxford white in it? Probably as a support color. Let me know in the comment section below, and we got another video right over here. I put together a Sherwin-Williams color palette that you can use on your next project or in your own home if you wanted to. And this palette features a color called West Highland White that we recently talked about on our channel. On The Paint People, we make our palettes in pyramid fashion, a top-down approach to putting colors together, and it all starts off right up top with our main color. This is going to be the choice that you can use probably in the majority of your home if you wanted to. It's the go-to neutral that's going to work in most cases. And in this palette, we have Radiant Dawn as the main color to start things off. ThePaintPeople.com is your go-to destination for quality paint and paint supplies. We're more than just a paint store. We are your partner in bringing color to life. Our commitment to fast shipping ensures that your order will reach you promptly so you can start your project without unnecessary waiting. Visit our website today and discover a world of colors, quality, and convenience. And as a thank you for supporting us on YouTube, use coupon code JAMES5 for 5% off your order. This is a color that's going to be light, airy, beautiful, warm, and vibrant. And what's nice about it is it does have a little bit of a yellow undertone, but it is softened with maybe a touch of orange to give it a really creamy feel. And it feels kind of upscale to me for some reason. Not super yellowy where it looks a bit sickly. I find this color to be extremely classic, yet still sophisticated and pretty wonderful, honestly. So Radiant Dawn, your main color, think of it going everywhere first, and then now you can see the next colors to sort of change things up if you so please. The first place you probably want to change up is on your baseboards, your doors, and your frames. We're going down from our main color to our two support colors, starting with, you guessed it, West Highland White. The color that we talked about earlier, this is going to be my choice in the palette for your trim and door color, or anything you want painted white, which typically happens in most houses. Either you have crown molding or even ceilings, you need a white paint, and the one that I really like to go with our main color is this color. West Highland White has just a hint of that same sort of creaminess, but it is a lot brighter with an 86 light reflectance value. That means it's reflecting 86% of the light that hits it, which is quite a bit. So a really crisp white, enough of a brightness difference with your main color to allow it to pop more, to separate itself a bit, but still kind of giving it a nice classic sort of subtle, soft feeling to it. You're not going super vibrant, super bluish white here. This one does sort of fit that whole light creamy feel that Radiant Dawn brings you. Now our second support color is quite a bit darker, and that's because this is going to be a choice for an alternative wall color that isn't so much an accent color. It's just kind of, a little more rich than Radiant Dawn. And the one that I decided to go with is actually quite a bit different temperature-wise too. It's Silver Strand. This color has a 59 LRV, about 15 points darker than Radiant Dawn, I would say, and then 27 points darker than West Highland White. So a bit of a step towards the mid-tone side of things. And more importantly, Silver Strand has this beautiful, slightly cool gray-green that definitely differentiates it from the other two. I would still say it's fairly neutral because it does have that dusty grayed out quality to it. So it will fit alongside Radiant Dawn in kind of a nice sort of semi-polarizing way that I enjoy. So it's not one that I would necessarily mix so much in the same space because they are a little complementary. They do have this warm and cool sort of back and forth, which I think works wonderful in sectioned off spaces. So maybe in an office, you can put Silver Strand, and then the hallway, you can put Radiant Dawn, or you could incorporate them two together, but I would maybe have not like a 50-50 mix. I would perhaps do an 80-20 mix just to keep things a little more coherent and focused, I would say. But I think Silver Strand is the more interesting choice as that secondary wall color because it's not as predictable. It's not just doubling down on the yellow and the warmth that Radiant Dawn brings and West Highland White already kind of brings. This gives you something a bit more fresh, which I think is nice. Okay, so main color out of the way, secondary support colors are all set. Now we're getting to the fun stuff, the finishing colors. These are going to be your accent choices for the areas that you really want to spice things up. Maybe the main color's not doing it for you in a specific room and Silver Strand is just a bit too different. Well, guess what? We have 3 options that are really rich and full of depth I think you'll really enjoy. Start things off, we have Functional Gray, which is a little more taupe than gray, much more of a chocolatey brown undertone that makes it very nice and interesting. Kind of this clay feeling that I think is really natural. Like it doesn't feel like a fake made in a lab color. There is an earthy quality that I really do gravitate towards. Kind of a mushroom soup sort of feel. Any Campbell's fans watching? Holla if you hear me. But we have a 37 LRV here, so another step towards that darker, rich color that I think some people really need, especially in areas that maybe get a lot of light, so you need a color that can sort of stand up to it a bit and not feel kind of blah and just lifeless. And also Functional Gray, it is kind of a neutral, so it's still going to be able to coexist in different design styles and aesthetics, and I think it's going to be one that you can use a decent amount of versatility, which I think is important. Next up we have Roycroft Pewter, which is a lot darker at a 13 LRV, and also getting back to that sort of coolness that Silver Strand brought. Roycroft Pewter, I feel, is more of a dark slate gray that does favor the blue side of things a little more than that cool green side. So you're getting a little bit of variety, but still sort of adjacent to that secondary color we talked about earlier, which I think also gives you some flexibility. Now, if you incorporate this with Radiant Dawn, the main color, then you really have fun with that back and forth between dark and light, warm and cool. So there is some continuity there with how you can put these colors together, whether you have the cool colors stick together and then the warm colors stick together, or mix and match it in interesting ways. I think there's a lot of fun you can have here. Roycroft Pewter is also part of the Historic Color Collection by Sherwin-Williams, and so is our third finishing color, which is Roycroft Rose. Now here is kind of the fun accent color for me. It's the one that brings a lot more vibrancy. It's also a bit lighter. It has a 33 LRV, so still definitely a darker mid-tone color, but it does feel more energetic because of that beautiful coral aspect. Kind of a base of this dusty red, touch of orange to give you that little kiss of energy that I think is really nice. And I just love how this is incorporated with Roycroft Pewter specifically, but all the other colors, there is a really nice dynamic that this option has if you want to have a bit of fun. If you want to have a fun powder room color, or maybe just a piece of furniture that you want to just pop this color in, or even within your accessories, so not necessarily painted on the wall, literally, you can have it in other ways. I think it just breaks up some of the neutrality that this palette brings, and I think it really brings everything together. Speaking of which, here's the palette all together. Let me know what you think, and if you want your own custom palette pyramid done by moi, we do offer it as a service, so you can reach out down below and I can give you all the information you need. As for more video content, right over here. The color White Down. The company Benjamin Moore. This is Hue Review, so let's do some reviewing. Hi! That's how I greet my daughter. Hi! How's it going? I don't mean to patronize my loyal viewers and subscribers. I'm James, if you don't know me. This is the Paint People, and this is the show that aims to review every single paint color from all the major paint companies, one review at a time. And today we're talking about a Benjamin Moore color that some would say is hardly a color, because it's kind of in that off-white category. It's called White Down, not to be confused with White Dove, which can sometimes be confused with Dove Wing. Some redundancies and some similar names happening here. But White Down is its own color, it's its own thing. So I'm gonna get into this review to talk about its vibe, its versatility, and then I'm gonna give you my verdict. What do I think about this color? How would I use it? And would I even use it in my home? So before we get into the details on this color, I have some alternatives from other paint companies. So if you like the look of White Down, but maybe you don't want to use Benjamin Moore for whatever reason, I have all the other major paint companies. These are close matches. They're not going to be spot on. Even if you get a custom color match done by me, for example, it'll be close. It'll be very close. Maybe even undiscernible to the naked eye. Is that a word? Undiscernible? But it's definitely going to give you the same sort of essence. Now, if you really want White Down specifically, the only way you can get it is if you get it in Benjamin Moore paint. So I just want to put that out there. Okay, so what's the vibe of this color? What is the bird's eye view on this color? What's it all about? Well, I did mention it's an off-white. And yes, I would say it's more off-white, even like off-white, rather than a clean white. And that's because of its color, or its hue. It has a very clear creaminess to it. And this is a creaminess that doesn't stem from maybe a soft beige that is perhaps a bit orange leaning, or maybe a touch of a brown sort of toned down effect. This color definitely has a little bit of this sort of buttery yellow creaminess that is maybe softened a touch by some gray, but it's not a ton. It's not enough to really tone down the yellow that much. I do find white down to be pretty yellow, so it does feel a little more stylized compared to even a cloud white or a simply white, which are warm leaning, but they're not as warm. White down does bring a lot of warmth to it, and it does kind of remind me of a color I saw today on a job site. I'm doing a collaboration with a company called Cornerstone. Awesome guys. They're doing this beautiful condo loft downtown, and the customer is deciding between cloud white and a color called timid white. She thought that cloud white was a bit too gray leaning. Timid white didn't feel as gray, so maybe it's the better choice. It just looks a bit yellow. And to me, white down feels even more saturated than timid white. It's around a 77, just under. That's actually kind of dark for a white. White paints are usually as high as the high 80s or even 90s, but the 70s, that's kind of light color territory. That's not really a true white to me. What I will say about white down is it definitely has its identity of being this creamier off-white, I think you can say. It's not going to feel as minimalist as a stark white, which means I would say that gives you even more incentive to test this color out before you use it on your project, especially if you're using it on your walls. You may think you want creamy walls, but you gotta be sure. So before you buy a big can of paint, get a really small tester first and test it out. I encourage you to. I really do. Okay, so that's the vibe. Creamy color, off-white. What is the versatility of this color? So I like to break this down on the interior and exterior side of things. I would call white down good old mid versatility. And I call it mid because I think the amount of creaminess does put it in that more traditional category, I would say. Even though there is some grayish-ness happening, which can make it feel a little more versatile, there's not quite enough of it to prevent it from just being a light creamy color. You have to be into that sort of color scheme. I'm not opposed to it. I mean, I have a couch that's essentially this color, and I love it, but I think when you have something that's more yellow dominant on the walls, there is more of a tendency to have some interesting reactions and interactions with your lighting. So if you have cooler lighting, if you have those north-facing rooms, then that yellow could easily turn green. And when you're not expecting that green to come out, I think that can be a bit tricky to navigate. As an exterior color, dare I say I might lean a little bit towards the high mid versatility wise. I actually think it's almost more versatile outside just because of the fact that it has some richness to it, so it won't get too washed out, unlike some brighter whites that will just lose all coloration whatsoever. And also because I do enjoy warmer colors on the outside, generally speaking, just because I think it works better with the sunlight. I wouldn't necessarily go all the way to high versatility just because, again, you have that yellowiness which can go a bit greeny. But yeah, I totally could see it working outside pretty nicely. Okay, so what's the verdict here? How would I use this paint color? Where would I put it on the Paint People palette pyramid? Is it a main color that you can use kind of everywhere? Is it a support color that's more the secondary sort of second in command color? Or is it a finishing color that's just good for accents? I would probably put this as a support color. It was kind of borderline main color just because of the fact that it isn't very bright, which means it can be a pretty versatile color in terms of its lightness. It's not super light, even in areas that maybe get too much light or not enough light. It's sort of in a decent spot where it'll reflect quite a bit of light back into the space, but still retain its coloration. So I think that's good. I just think personally the creamy aspect sort of makes me a little apprehensive about recommending it as kind of a default color, go to all over the house sort of main color. In some cases it could work. It just more often than not, I do see it being more of that secondary color, and I almost see it supporting more so as a wall color rather than a trim color. I think for baseboards you want to go a bit brighter and a bit more clean for sure. All right, so that's how I would use it. But would I? Could I see myself using this color in my home right now? No. Kind of a big no, actually. For whatever reason, I'm not really into using this color in my current home as a wall color specifically. I think it's a bit too yellow for my taste. If I were to have this type of color, it would be off of the walls, which is what's happening with my couch. So I have a white down-ish kind of couch that I'm really enjoying, and then the walls surrounding it are much more neutral and just more of a blank canvas, which I enjoy the look of. It's actually kind of like this. Yeah, little corduroy action. Wayfair, you got just what I need. That's a review. Let me know in the description down below if you want this color in an upcoming palette pyramid episode. Essentially a color palette, and we have another video right over here for you. It's time for a color palette pyramid featuring Decorators White by Benjamin Moore. All the colors we're going to talk about today are from the same company. They are all arranged in a really easy to understand fashion that we call the Paint People palette pyramid, starting with your main color up top, your support colors right below it, and then finally your finishing colors to accentuate certain parts of your home. We recently did a review on Decorators White by Benjamin Moore. I'll leave it in the cards up top and in the description down below if you want to check that out, a more dedicated review on that color. But in this video, we're going to take Decorators White and put it into a color palette that I put together myself, personally, for you, for free. So why don't we start with Decorators White specifically? Where in the palette pyramid does it fit? I would almost always put this in the support category, right in the middle. Decorators White is such an awesome choice as a white because that's kind of what it is. It's very clean, it's very soft and subtle, it's not overly bright either, and anytime you would need a white, which would be on baseboards traditionally, doors, frames, ceilings, sometimes walls, maybe, Decorators White's great for that. It just has a bit of a gray undertone, so nothing that pulls it into an overly warm or cool direction, typically speaking. And I think it's really earned its name as being a reliable choice for decorators and anyone else who wants to use it. So in this support section of the palette pyramid, you have colors that are supporting your main default color up top. And while Decorators White is being supportive as being the baseboard color, Ice Cap, our second color, is going to be a secondary choice on your walls. So this is very much a cool leaning color, which might give you a hint as to the kinds of colors I'm going to be putting in this whole palette. And I love it because it has this very sort of familiar blue, green, gray combination that I really enjoy. Kind of a muted, very cool seafoam green in a way. But in practicality, based on what people's lights typically are like in person, this color will feel a little cooler than you might suspect. It just has a touch of that green as an undertone. Light reflectance value-wise, this has a 67, so that does put it in the light color category. I think as a color, it's going to give you a lot of use. If you were open to these cooler colors that were a little more saturated than a traditional, just neutral, gray beigey type of color, this is an awesome choice. Perfect choice for things like bathrooms. I love this color in the bathroom. Even if you're not using it on walls, this is a color that I could totally use on the vanity. If you wanted to just refresh it, refinish it, just give it some new life. Maybe you're like me and you have one of those mahogany thermofoil type vanities that are just too dark. A color like this will really revitalize it and make it nice and fresh. But as a support color, Ice Cap is a great alternative to your main color in the areas where you don't really want to use it. Now, what is that main color? Well, why don't we just get to it? It is Wish from the Affinity line, AF680. Now, this color is quite different from Ice Cap because it doesn't really have any of that blue-green to speak of. This is going to be one of those super versatile, neutral, grayish colors where it kind of has that same sort of color as like a chocolate milkshake where it's barely brown, and there is some gray to tone it down as well. I find this color to be immensely versatile. It's going to be able to fit in a lot of different situations. Whether you do lean into cool colors a little bit more or you like to stick with warm ones, this is going to work in both situations very, very well. LRV wise, or lightness score, is right around 58, so a little bit darker than Ice Cap, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. It has more depth and richness, so the color will be noticeable, but in areas that maybe don't get great light, the room might feel a little bit darker. So even though you give up a little bit in lightness, you are making up for it with the overall color being very neutral and just easy to work with. So Wish becomes your default color, your main color option, and then Ice Cap is a support color where you want to switch things up on the walls, maybe in your bathrooms and bedrooms. Then Decorators White becomes an awesome trim color choice that you can use on your baseboards, your doors, and your frames. So before we finish off with our 3 finishing colors, I wanted to let you know that we are now offering custom palette pyramids for our viewers. This is a service we provide as an alternative to your traditional online color consultations. Essentially, if you're looking for a personalized color palette pyramid, we can do that for you. And even in these videos, we do 6 colors for each palette pyramid, but the ones that you'll be getting will have 11. So plenty of options to work with, yet still structured enough that it's not going to totally overwhelm you. You can be involved as much as you want with the colors. So if you have specific choices that you want to incorporate, or you have no idea and you just want me to put a palette together from scratch, essentially, no problem. Link in the description down below if you want your own personalized palette pyramid. All right, so the finishing colors. This is the row that is the most fun. It's gonna have the most color, the most richness. These are going to be your accent color choices, anywhere you want to spice things up and just add some depth. Even though you have the most options in this row, don't think you have to use all of them in the same place. Think less is more here. Maybe pick one or two. This is just supposed to be the last bit of seasoning on top. Starting with Templeton Gray. And even though gray's in the name, I see this color way more as a shaded teal. It is a little more blue dominant, but it still has some of that green mixed in. And it has a 24 LRV just about, so a lot more depth here. This is gonna be a color that suits Ice Cap perfectly. The two fit together like a glove. Comparatively with Wish, there's gonna be a more complementary relationship that I think is really interesting, yet you still are sort of fitting in with this greeny blue theme. Now, what if Templeton Gray was a bit too cool leaning? You wanted to sort of stay within the warm realm a little bit. Well, that's what Creekside Green gives you. This is almost a more khaki feeling green, I feel. It has more of an earthy sort of brown base rather than a blue one. Also a little bit lighter with a 31 LRV. That'll give you a bit more life. And this is going to give you a bit more of a neutral option as well. And then our third finishing color is still within the same sort of realm. It is called Rainy Afternoon. A beautiful color, 15 LRV, so much darker than the rest of them. And this is going to give you a really deep toned down green. It sort of feels like it has just a hint of blue to cool it down a little bit. And Benjamin Moore's description is awesome. As serene as a drizzly Sunday. So it just has that mellow feeling to it that I really enjoy. And like I mentioned, of all the colors, this is going to give you the most depth by far. So this is what the palette pyramid looks like all together. Please let me know what you think. This is more of a green blue centric palette, and then Wish is kind of just holding it all together, being that great glue color that it is. Today's color is White Rock. The company is Benjamin Moore, and I love reviewing paint colors. The way that I do it is I tell you the vibe of the color, what you can expect from it, how versatile I think it is, and then I'll give you my verdict, how I would use it, and whether I actually would use it in my home. And then I'll give you two color pairings that are similar in terms of their undertones, but just give you different levels of depth. So you'll have an off-white and a mid-tone. James, stop telling us what to expect. Just get on with it. Okay, sure, I will, if you press that like button for me. I also want to give you some alternative colors from other paint companies. So if you weren't using Benjamin Moore, but you like the vibe of White Rock, these are going to be similar colors in each respective company's catalog. The only thing I'll say is these are not spot-on matches. The only way to get White Rock in its purest form, its purest rock formation, is to just get in a Benjamin Moore paint, which I don't think is a bad thing because I think Benjamin Moore makes some pretty darn good paint. Today's sponsor is us. ThePaintPeople.com is your go-to destination for quality paint and paint supplies. We're more than just a paint store. We are your partner in bringing color to life. Visit our website today and discover a world of colors, quality, and convenience. And as a thank you for supporting us on YouTube, use coupon code JAMES5 for 5% off your order. So let's get right into this color. What's the vibe? What are you getting with White Rock? You are getting white. You're getting a variation of white. It's more of an off-white to me, but it does have a lovely brightness to it. It has an 83 LRV, which is pretty high on the light reflectance value scale. Essentially, if you're not a subscriber, if you're a new viewer, LRV translates to light reflectance value, and the higher that number is, the brighter the color will be. So as you get closer to 100, you're going to get that pure white. And 83 out of 100, it's a pretty good lightness score. I will say the fact that it's not 90 tells me that there's a decent amount of colorant that has gone into this color, which has given it some saturation in the form of a golden honey yellow undertone. Maybe a dash of orange as well. I find that to really invigorate this color and give it a very special sort of glow that I think could be good in certain circumstances. This is not a color that you will confuse for being a stark white because there's enough of that creamy yellow warmth to really distinguish itself from something that is much more sterile, like a Chantilly lace, for example. Really, this is for the people that purposely are looking for something with some of that warmth, some of that yellow. And unfortunately, with yellow-white paint colors, there can be a tendency to have a little bit of green coming through, depending on your lighting, or even if you're in a northern exposed room, that could have an impact. It's not really anything to do with the color, it's everything around the color that can sort of influence things. So if you're not sure about how this color will play in your home, you just got to test it out first. So before you get a big can of paint, get a really tiny one first. Test your colors, please. Okay, so we got a creamy, yellowy, kind of honey white. Sounds fun, right? That's the vibe. How versatile is this paint color? Now for this section, I want to change things slightly. Before I was using a scale of like mid, low, mid, high. I'm just going to go with a good old tier system. S tier being super usable color. You can put it in any situation. And then F tier being very niche, very specific use case. White rock gets a C+ versatility for me. Now, because it's an off-white, that gives it some brownie points because a lot of people can use off-white, but I'm not sure a ton of people are going to be stoked about using a really creamy yellowy white. I think that is going to be a more specific taste in terms of a wall color or especially a trim color. So from an interior perspective, I almost see this color being used a little more seldomly in certain areas. Maybe something like a sunroom where you really want to over accentuate that bright vibrancy the color brings, because it does have that. It is pretty clean. It's not a sickly yellow, like citrusy lemon lime kind of color. It doesn't have that. It has a nice buttery kind of yellow that I think is quite appealing, but there are going to be situations where it'll just be a little too much, and I think that could present some limitations on the interior side of things. On the exterior side of things, I almost see white rock being perfectly used as a lighter trim color for maybe a deeper yellow on the main body of the home. One of the color pairings I'm going to talk about later on, I'll tell you now, it's vellum. I think vellum could be interesting as an exterior main body color, and then white rock could be a perfect pairing as a lighter trim color. So you have different levels of depth, and you still have that sort of shared yellowy, buttery undertone that I think is pretty nice. If you want yellow. For everyone else, probably not going to be too nice. Moderate versatility. Warm colors are still in, so I think it has that going for it. But there are some things you need to think about before you go and paint your whole hall. Is it a main color you can paint your whole house with? Is it an accent color that's more of a finishing touch here and there? Or is it a support color that you can use in the secondary parts of your home or on your trim? Believe it or not, I would put white rock as a finishing color. I was very close to making it a support color, but the reason I picked finishing is because I think this color would shine most as an accent room color in maybe one part of your home, like a solarium or even a kitchen. I could technically see it working, although sometimes yellow can be a bit much. Maybe the bedroom for someone that really loves to wake up just with the sun, super vibrant. Not me, I like darker colors in bedrooms, but some people like those warm, invigorating colors that give you that zest for life as soon as you wake up. Could be an option. So that's how I would use it. But would I? I think so. White rock has this optimism to it that I think is really enjoyable. I could see it working in a bedroom, believe it or not, just for that same reason I mentioned earlier. Just really wake you up as soon as the sun comes up and just reflects all that warm light back into the space. And I would definitely pair it with incandescent light bulbs so you get that warm glow and really double down on that rather than go with something a little more LED dominant and cool leaning, because I think that would kind of mess things up a bit. Now, in terms of color pairings that go with it, I already mentioned vellum off the top. That's kind of your darker alternative, a little more saturated and deep. Love that color, by the way. And then the off-white, the even brighter white to kind of go with it, would be Mountain Peak white. Another one of those slightly warmer leaning whites, but this one is a lot brighter than white rock. It has more crispness to it. So I think it'll be an awesome option as a trim color to sort of coexist with it. If you weren't using Chantilly lace, of course. Why would you use that though? Come on. So that's a review. If you want to see a white rock color palette at the end of this week in our Pellet Pyramids episode, let me know down below in the comment section. And we have another video right over here. Check out this guy. The color aesthetic white. The company, Sherwin-Williams. This is Hue Review, so let's review. I'm James from The Paint People. This is a channel all about painting, decorating, color, and color theory. And Hue Review is where I try and review every single paint company's paint colors. And today is all about Sherwin-Williams aesthetic white. So I'm going to give you the vibe of this color, what you can expect from it, the versatility aspect, and how usable and flexible it is as a color. And then finally, I'll give you my verdict, how I would use this color, and would I even use it. ThePaintPeople.com is your go-to destination for quality paint, paint and paint supplies. We're more than just a paint store, we are your partner in bringing color to life. Our commitment to fast shipping ensures that your order will reach you promptly so you can start your project without unnecessary waiting. Visit our website today and discover a world of colors, quality, and convenience. And as a thank you for supporting us on YouTube, use coupon code JAMES5 for 5% off your order. So before we dive into aesthetic white, here are some other companies' colors. These are going to be close alternatives to aesthetic white in Valspar, in Behr, in Farrow and Ball, etc. In case your contractor is really against using Sherwin-Williams for some reason, which is not usually the case, these are some other options from other paint companies. Not spot-on matches, but they're kind of close. So let's talk about aesthetic white. What's the vibe of this color? If you clicked on this video, you probably have some interest in using it in your home. What can you expect from it? Well, the first thing is it's not white. It's more like an off-white to me. And that's because of its level of depth. It's not a clean, stark, sterile white that you might find in a can of primer or whatever. This is a color that has a little bit of depth, maybe more than you might expect. And the way we can verify this is by looking at the LRV, or the light reflectance value. And this is just a number from 0 to 100 that tells us the percentage of light that the color reflects. I often describe it as a 0 to 100 lightness score. The higher that number, the closer to 100, the lighter and brighter and ultimately whiter it will appear. So aesthetic white has a 73 LRV, which is pretty light. It's basically in that top quarter of all paint colors, but that's not nearly as high of a number as a white paint color would have, which is maybe in the 90s. What you're dealing with here is a very light neutral paint color. To me, has a base of this sort of gray beige combination, but there is this little bit of earthy taupiness, like a bit of a brown quality that gives it the slightest purple undertone. That might scare some of you off because maybe you're not looking for a light lavender, lilac color. And even if you are, that's okay because aesthetic white doesn't read as a light purple. It's just that violet undertone sort of pulls it away from feeling greeny. It has this just earthy quality to it that I can only describe as being taupey. A very light alternative to a brown gray color. I think in a lot of cases, aesthetic white will just feel like a light neutral, very subtle, soft. That purple undertone really just comes into play if you have other things in your space that might conflict with it. Usually on the green side of things, I feel, or anything in that other direction of neutral that can over accentuate that little bit of violet purple quality. And the only way you can really even know that is if you just test the color out. So I always encourage testing colors, especially with neutrals like this that can kind of go either way. They're very passive colors, but they can be very volatile. So test. So that's the vibe of the color. You got a light neutral, a little bit of that purple quality, very, very subtle. What is the versatility aspect? Is that purple enough to sort of make it not usable in a lot of cases? On the interior side of things, I would put aesthetic white as a low-high versatility. So on the lower end of high, and the reason I say that is it's a neutral. It's passive, it's subtle, it's toned down. It's not going to disturb anyone in negative ways. It has a lovely airy quality to it that makes it feel pretty effortless, I feel. And I think colors that are this light are being used more and more in spaces. I feel a lot of people do like their rooms to feel airy and light. I knock its versatility score down just slightly because of the fact that it is a bit lighter. So if you wanted something with a little more oomph, a little more depth, this color might be a bit too light, especially in those really well-lit parts of your home. It just might fade into the background. And I guess that purple undertone isn't perfect in all situations, so still very versatile, but maybe not like numero uno in versatility. On the exterior side of things, I would put aesthetic white as a mid versatility. The undertones don't really bother me as much when used outside. It's more so the lightness of this color. Honestly, it will look more white when used outside with the big sun as your light source, but because of that you'll also lose a lot of that nuance that makes it really unique. So an awesome off-white choice to be used outside. It's not going to feel like the same color when used outside compared to inside. I think it's a pretty solid choice as a trim color as long as it coexists nicely with the main body color, or as the main color on the home if you want that slightly grayy off-white look. This could be a good choice. Okay, so what's the verdict? How would I use aesthetic white in my home? Is this a color that I could use all over a space? Is it more of a secondary support color or maybe even a finishing color? I think aesthetic white would be a great main color. It's not going to be the ultimate main color for a lot of people because of the violet undertone, but I think if it suits the flooring, number one, it's going to be a color that you can continue throughout your home. A little bit lighter than I usually recommend as just a go-to color, but I still think there's enough richness in here where it will feel pretty minimal, but it will be a great canvas color to just sort of put in the background of your home. The neutral aspect does give it a lot of brownie points in that respect. That's how I would use it, but would I? So before I give you my verdict on whether I would use it, what are some other colors that I would pair with it? On the light side of things, I'd probably go with pure white, which is an awesome go-to Sherwin-Williams color. That's awesome for these sort of neutrals that are not too cool, not too warm, kind of in the middle. And then on the slightly darker side, I would recommend grayish, which has a 60 LRV. So a lot more depth, more of that earthy, taupey, violet quality. This one is way more on display. If you want an idea of what that actual undertone of aesthetic white looks like, grayish will give you a much better representation of that because it has more colorant in it. So aesthetic white, main color. That's how I would use it. But would I? Yes, I think I would. I think this is a color that I really enjoy. It's kind of a grougey color, bit of a rougey gray beige that I think is pretty interesting. I don't have a color like this in my home at the moment, but I could see myself using it if I wanted to go in that slightly earthier, light neutral direction. So that's a review. If you want to see an aesthetic white color palette pyramid at the end of this week, let me know in the comment section down below. And we got another video right over here. The color today is Dune White, and the company is Benjamin Moore. This is Hue Review, so let's review. I'm James from the Paint People, and this is the premier color review show that aims to review every single color out there, at least the ones from the major paint companies. The reason I wanted to do this series is to provide you a little more context on colors specifically, rather than focusing on color pairings, because a lot of you are wondering, what's the deal with this color? What's the vibe of it? How versatile is this color? Would you use it, James? Well, guess what? I'm going to answer all of those questions in this video, in this episode of Hue Review, because we're chipping away at all these colors one video at a time. So let's get into the review. You know I love to start with vibes. Is this a good vibe color? Does it have some good vibes? What is the deal with Dune White? The name says it all. It's a white paint color, but in order to give you the details on what kind of white it is, let's talk about it a little bit. I think the first thing we can see is the color's LRV on the Benjamin Moore website. And this is an 80-ish LRV white, and that means it only reflects about 80% of the light that hits it, which is most of the light, but it's not as much as it could reflect. And if you're new to the channel, if you're not yet a subscriber, I highly recommend you try doing that because it's kind of fun. You've probably heard me talk about LRV quite a bit. It is the percentage of light that a color reflects, which translates to the higher the number, the brighter the color. And I think an 80 LRV white really solidifies it as an off-white. It's not quite a bright, sterile, stark white that you would maybe have on your ceiling that you just want super clean. I find Dune White to be pretty off as a white, and I don't necessarily mean that disparagingly. There's enough colorant in here to really push it into that territory of seeing the color rather than seeing it as a white. And what you get here is a creamy-ish off-white. Well, it has this kind of honey yellow undertone, but it also has some gray. And that's where, in some cases, some issues can arise because yellow plus gray in paint can sometimes equal green. And this doesn't always happen with Dune White. It is one of the more well-behaved, warmer off-whites where it doesn't go into green directions too much, but it's possible. And it's even more prevalent because it has that added depth. It's not just a clean white with a dash of warmth. There's a decent, noticeable amount in here that can make it a little more volatile than you might expect. That being said, one of the benefits of having added richness, in my mind, is you now have a paint color. You don't have a white or a variation of white. That gives this color a little more personality in practical use, and it also makes it a little bit better of a candidate for walls, in my opinion. The reason I say that is because I don't often recommend going with bright white walls on any project. I always find there's better options either in the temperature direction of those warmer colors, or even just the more settled down, toned down off-whites that have some gray to soften them, keep them a bit more chilled out, you know, not too overpowering. Benjamin Moore describes Dune White as having hushed, grayish green tones. Yeah, I think there is a dash of that green undertone, mainly because of the warmth and the gray interacting. It's a byproduct of how it's composed, but I wouldn't call it a very, very light green by any means. So don't worry about that. But it is a color that you should probably test out before you commit to using. Okay, so that's the vibe. What is the versatility aspect here? I find versatility to be extremely important in paint colors because of the fact that if you're using colors that can be used in multiple situations with multiple other colors, it gives you a lot more options in the future. I find that it's better to help a lot of people with colors that they don't feel like they need to change up within 6 months. I like giving you options. I like giving you ways out of your colors, essentially. And a versatile paint color will do that. If you're using this color indoors, I would say Dune White, it actually has a mid versatility to me. And the reasons I say that is you have that little bit of green, which is sometimes there, sometimes not. I almost wish it was a bit more prominent because then you know what you're getting in a way. But the real reason it's mid for me on the interior side of things has nothing really to do with its undertones. It's more so its LRV. I think an 80 LRV is getting a bit too dark to be recommended as a bright white trim color. It just has a little too much to it. There is that warmth that'll be prominent, but also the gray aspect does sort of take it away from feeling white. It's an off-white. In a lot of cases, when you're using different wall colors, it might look like your trim was painted with old oil paint that has yellowed a little bit in time. Not that extreme, but you get what I mean. On the exterior side of things, I would probably give this color another mid. It sort of wins and loses because that very, very slightly hidden green undertone can become a little more prominent when used outside. That can cause some issues depending on what other colors you use, but it gains versatility points for me because it has that little bit of depth, has that little bit of richness to it. I think whenever you use colors outside, especially white paint colors, they're going to be that much brighter when the sun is hitting them. So not a super exciting choice, but it's a pretty decent option for the outdoors. Okay, so Dune White. What's my verdict? How would I use this color? Where would it go on the palette pyramid? I think this is definitely a support color for me, and not necessarily in the way that you might expect. If you've watched our recent reviews, I've talked a lot about white paint colors recently, and they always go as like a trim color. But I've seen Dune White more so as a wall color. So this is going to be an option for someone that maybe has a main color that is a bit darker, like maybe like a, 70 or 60 LRV, and then you want another option on your walls that's perhaps a bit brighter, but still kind of in that neutral territory. Dune White is pretty good for that. Not necessarily a trim color, but another wall color supporting a main color that is a bit darker, if that makes sense. So that's how I would use it. But would I? What are my thoughts on Dune White? Honestly, I can't see a reason why I would use this color. It's just not very exciting to me. I feel like it takes a bunch of half measures. Like, it's clean, but it's also not too bright. It has a tiny bit of a green undertone, but it's sometimes non-existent and can be kind of unpredictable. The warmth is nice, but it doesn't really go far enough where it's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none type of off-white. I don't know. I don't like it that much. I'm not a huge fan, honestly, but that's just my opinion. And guess what? That's a review. If you want me to do a palette pyramid with this color involved, let me know down below. And we have another one right over here.